Adam.
Hi.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh, thank you for doing the interview.
It's my pleasure. I've learned from the best.
Turning the tables on you. I love it.
I'm definitely on the right side of the camera over here.
Right.
So I don't know how much the Dirty Moderate Nation knows about your former life, which is super fascinating. Kind of amazing, and I was lucky enough to hang out with you last night in your element. Tell everybody where you started and why it was so cool, because it totally was.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, for doing the interview, because I think this is an important discussion, because everybody now knows, those who know me now know me in this iteration of my life, political pundit, podcaster, hopefully consistent voice on behalf of democracy. But moons ago, in my young life, in my first act, I was a Broadway producer, and I had the great good fortune of doing a number of shows, from Amadeus to the Crucible to A View from the Bridge. But I ended up being mentored by the late, great Margot Lyon, who is a very well-known Broadway producer, who brought me the idea to co-produce John Waters's 1988 movie Hairspray, which was a cult classic, and turn it into a big splashy Broadway musical. And I was immediately drawn to the idea, and it changed my life. I don't know that I could have anticipated that. I was 27 when it opened, and for all of its success, I think that's why I'm so glad you're asking me this. It's exactly why I'm sitting here now talking to you, because I think art and politics, culture and politics are intertwined. I don't think you can separate the two. And I think even when I was a active producer, and I'm still a devotee of the theater, I was a child of the theater, I think I always made those two things go hand in hand. So there was an inevitable course for me, I think, loving theater and politics both, to now end up actually working in the realm of politics and media and the ideas of politics, writing, speaking, and all that. It's almost like a natural progression of my first life. But if those people who remember our initial copy here at the podcast, right, they remember that, I have a Broadway background. And we even did a Hairspray 20th anniversary episode. Everybody should listen to it, with David Armstrong, who hosts his own Broadway podcast, because Hairspray tried out in Seattle in the late spring of summer 2002, prior to Broadway, at the Fifth Avenue Theater, where David Armstrong was longtime artistic director. We actually have some exciting theater people coming up on the show, some cultural episodes I think people are going to like. So I think these worlds go together. I think there's a gravitational pull between the two of them. And certainly in my journey, I found a way to reconcile my first life with what I do now.
I don't think on the surface it seems like the most natural progression. Like, how do you go,
right.
On the surface it's like, okay, Hairspray is probably, first of all, it's so classic, but it's super campy, it's super fun, super hopeful. It's dancing and bullying and love and mental health and class and race. It's got like so many of these like amazing Americana elements to it, and it's all wrapped up so beautifully. To go from that to like being on Fox News with Trish Regan, and then having the tagline of your current podcast of saving democracy one episode at a time. I mean, that's like a pretty broad stroke across the board. Now, knowing you the way that I do and understanding what you do and how you do it, it makes sense to me. And I think it was always in you to politicize and be in touch with the political aspect of what was going on around you. I just think that's kind of an innate part of who you are. Did you feel that way back in the day when you started producing this incredible show? Did you know the impact it was going to have, like societally and in the space that it was, and how impactful it would continue to be? Did you know?
I would first probably say this. I think any producer who has a new musical, I don't care what the musical is, and tells you that they think it's going to be a game changer or be impactful is probably full of shit. Because nobody knows.
Sure.
William Goldman famously said, nobody knows anything. I always said this about Hairspray. From the beginning, it seemed to have a magic carpet ride to its actualization, to its full blown birth, if you will, from the readings, the sort of developmental stages of it, to the initial songs Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman, the composer and lyricist, played for Margot and me, the way in which the cast came together, the short time, 2.5, 3 years from our first reading to the opening. Many musicals can take 7, 8, 9. It can be a real slog. It seemed to be haloed in a weird sort of way. So I kind of felt that we were on the right path. I don't know that I ever could have anticipated the kind of success that it had. It was certainly beyond my wildest dreams. And I also could have never anticipated the kind of foundational aspect it would have for me, you know? There's a line in the second act that Tracy sings when she's still in jail. I'm gonna eat some breakfast and change the world. And I love that line because it's sort of like get up every day and make a difference on in miniature in your level. But in my life, it was like, yeah, you know what? I did do this, and I was producing as a young age, and I was deeply political. Everybody that knows me from when I was young, but certainly from college, especially, I wrote columns for the NYU paper. I always talked about politics. I did 2 internships on Capitol Hill. I also interned at City Hall. I mean, I was incredibly active. And then in my Broadway career, I raised money for various politicians for presidential campaigns, senatorial campaigns. And a lot of people would go home at night and read scripts. I'd go home and read books on politics, books on history, books on America. So it is, like you said, it is me. And from the outside, it seems like an improbable journey. But if you know me, and I'm glad that we're talking about this, you'd see that this all roads led to this. It makes a lot of sense, I think.
Some of the characters in Hairspray are just, kind of the epitome of these, some of the issues that we're still dealing with today. You have the bullies, and you have, the judgy moms, and you have, people who don't want to allow people with different skin colors to even dance together or, be near each other in that environment. It's kind of disgusting. So now that we've gone from then to now, what is it, 20?
Yeah, Hairspray, the musical, opened in 2002, so 21 years.
Yeah, so 21 years later, like, how do you see the progressions in our society having changed? Now, although the play is set in the 60s, in the early 60s, clearly, the issues are of that time. But nonetheless, headlines just today, people are vilifying drag queens, and, a lot of the issues that are being dealt with in the play are still an issue. Where do you think we are? How far have we come in the 21 years, in your opinion?
It's such a great question. First of all, I think I want to make sure that I never sound too grand or wax too eloquent. When we set out to do a musical, that we thought would be a well-made musical, and thankfully it turned out to be, but it would be a fun, exciting, moving, enthralling entertainment piece of pop culture, right? Smart with heart, something that could connect to people, something that had a message. What we ultimately were attracted to Hairspray for, and certainly I was, is its message. Hairspray is very serious about being yourself. It's not just about integrating the Corny Collins dance show and Tracy getting the love of Link Larkin, the hunky boy. It's about that gives you the sort of character arc and the thematic arc. But the story has such a transcendent message. It tells you, go out and be whatever you want to be. Tracy's battling weight, obviously by depicting, it's not commented on the show, a man in a dress as the mother. It was John Waters' way of saying there is no comment on it.
I love that. That's, to me,
that was way ahead of it.
The most powerful part of that character is that it's never addressed.
And it would never be. And John Waters' muse was the late, great drag queen Divine, who sadly died 5 or 6 days after the original movie opened. So Hairspray had a pall over it for him. The musical kind of brought the joy back that of what he had created. He created these characters, by the way, in his bedroom in Baltimore. Corny Collins show is an American bandstand type show that was obviously famous in Philadelphia, but the cities all across the country had their own versions of that. The Corny Collins show in Baltimore was called the Buddy Dean Show. It was a real show. And they did have one day a month was Negro Day, as they call it. It's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And don't forget 1962, and of course I always want to make sure I'm doing my political historical thing. This is Kennedy. Kennedy hadn't been killed yet. We're still in the Camelot era. We're pre-civil rights. We're on the cusp. I mean, we're post-Montgomery bus boycott and all that, but we don't have a Civil Rights Act yet. We don't have a Voting Rights Act yet. We still have a Jim Crow South raging. And you can see Hairspray is sort of on the brink of that change. It's very important. 1962 is very different from 1968. By 1968, the world is completely different. America's mired in Vietnam, and there's a huge backlash to civil rights. Race riots have broken out, and Bobby Kennedy's killed, Martin Luther King is killed. So, that innocent glow in 1962, which Hairspray, of course, has, certainly transforms into something darker and more intense. But back to your and more foreboding even. Mm-hmm. I think that the more things change, the more things stay the same. And I think American history is a constant cycle between action and reaction. And when people talk about reactionary, people can use it. Oh, don't be so reactionary in the restaurant or whatever. But reactionary historically has been used to mean the right wing. People, the forces of reaction against the forces of progress. And America has always had a boogeyman from the beginning. Whether it was the Native American, the slave, the Catholic, the papal whore, they used to go the papist, they used to call it, the anarchist, right? The gay man and lesbian woman, the Jew, the immigrant, that's always been, because our country's ideal, which I still think is the greatest ideal and the greatest blueprint for self-government, is the first time that this has ever been tried or tested. Mm-hmm. And we're only 250 years old. When people beat up on America, I'm like, hello, there were thousands of years of religious warfare on the continent of Europe. And go look at the Ming Dynasty in China. I mean, you can look at the rest of the world, which long preceded us, and understand what it means to fight for people, for things to get better. Specific to Hairspray was the beginning of the Bush II administration, Bush 43. I think we all thought, because of the embrace of this show and the popularity of it, that we had moved past this. Whereas sort of it was still a little bit outre for there to be a man in drag, and even some investors passed on it, sadly. They were like, well, Harvey's in a dress. Yeah. They're like, isn't that kind of an off-Broadway? They were like, isn't that kind of an off-Broadway thing? And I used to say, it's not. Sorry. This is a big Broadway musical. If you don't see it, you don't see it. Listen, as producer, someone could bring me something. So I'm sorry. I didn't know that I should have put money in Cats or something. I mean, I would have thought it was stupid. But, that's subjective. Sure. But, yeah, and I think that to be on this cycle where we go from when Hairspray opened in 2002 to the election of the first black president in 2008, Hairspray still running, of course, then, and Barack Obama in 2012, then Trump, and now we're in, as you know, on their podcast, all we do is fight back against MAGA and fight for not Democrat or Republican, because that's not what we're fighting now. We're fighting democracy and authoritarianism. And what is the attack on drag? What is the attack on trans kids? What is this backlash to being yourself other than authoritarianism? Mm-hmm. You can define it as more specifically as a kind of neo-fascism. You can call it autocracy. I mean, they're not all the same definition, but they're cousins. But certainly Ron DeSantis using state power, for example, to punish people, to ban books, all the bills that are pending now, some of which have passed recently in Tennessee, but I think there's 13 or 14 red states that are threatening to use state power to ban gender affirming care and whether or not the way in which people can identify and all of that stuff. And what is that but that kind of mass panic? And Hairspray, though it does it with a smile, look at the Von Tussles, they're panicking. Look at the idea of, oh my God, that we're going to have not only a fat person on the show, we're going to have an integrated dance show. And this was the American debate, right? This is only 60 years ago, roughly. Basically.
So would Amber and Velma have been Trump supporters?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yep, I think
Are
so.
you-
I think they were clearly segregationists then, so they would have been, which at that time they would have likely been Democrats. They would have been right-wing Democrat, not necessarily, or they could have been segregationist Republicans. But remember, the Southern Democratic Party was the Democratic Party. They were the ones that were fighting civil rights. Although LBJ signed it, there would be no civil rights bill without the Republicans of yore. You can't even believe the way the parties have switched. The party of Lincoln was still the party of Lincoln.
Right.
Bob Dole, you and I talked about this yesterday, was a young congressman who obviously became senator. Gerald Ford
From the
became
South.
president from, well, Dole was from Kansas, actually.
Okay.
But Ford was from Michigan, but they were from lily white, Midwestern districts. And they voted, yeah. It was, there was an idea whose time had come. There was no, on the Senate floor, William McKinley Dirksen was a famous Illinois Republican who helped shepherd this. Not just, of course, Hubert Humphrey did. There were Democrats that did, but they were from the North. The South was, of course, adamantly opposed to this, and they were entirely Democratic. Now, as I said, the parties have switched. To the point of Von Tussle, they certainly would have been on the right, wherever the right, not the right, but the right wing.
Right.
On the right and the wrong.
I was just going to say, otherwise known as the wrong.
Right.
In our opinion, anyway.
Right. And everybody knows who listens to this podcast, I'm not a Democrat. I'm now fighting the good fight. I hold a lot of conservative positions, but conservatism isn't fascism. That's what people have to understand. And certainly what the Republican Party was, even if you didn't like them, then this is a very dangerous iteration of it. This is not, again, they just showed it's not your mother or grandmother's party. This isn't Ronald Reagan's party. If this were Ronald Reagan's party, we wouldn't be debating whether we should prevent Russia from expanding a land war in Europe, the biggest since World War II. Anyway, I'm sorry. So I digress.
Yeah,
I digress.
So ultimately, Tracy did not have to fight to dance with the black kids.
No.
But she chose to. You don't have to do this. You could have very well retired. How many Tonys? Come on, take a moment to brag.
Well, personally, I only have one, but my
Okay.
shows have many.
Yeah.
Collectively.
So you were 20. How old were you when you retired the first time?
Well, I retired from the theater. I didn't
From the
retire.
theater. From the
33.
theater. So you could have done anything really.
Yeah,
then.
I could have gone on.
And what did you choose to do?
This. Well, I went to
No,
grad.
what did you do? You went to.
Well, I moved. I was in a relationship. I moved to LA, and then I found out I didn't want to be in film and TV. But I fell in love with a guy who was British, and we ended up moving to Britain. We were engaged.
Mhm.
I went back to theater producing. I went to work for Bill Kenwright, who's a very big British West End producer, and he owns for British football fans the Everton Football Club, big soccer mogul. And I realized then I loved working with Bill and I loved doing it, but I realized this isn't what I want to do. And when my relationship fell apart, I wanted to come home. I loved London dearly, but I knew it was time, and I always wanted to go to grad school. And I had been a political science major at NYU. I went to study what was called American Studies, which is essentially what we do in the podcast. Essentially, what Hairspray is American Studies. It's everything from performance studies to culture to pop music to soul music to history, literature, politics, and everything. And there are various disciplines in it. And I went to Brown and got a master's because I thought that it was time for me to move into the realm of politics, not elective politics, which I had pondered, but the world I'm in now. Fox News, you asked earlier, was improbable, but you know what? Without Fox News, I don't think we would be working together in a way. I don't think we would have the platform and growth that I've had, because it was my agent's choice at the time to have me stand out as somebody who needed to build a career as a media person. I wasn't just going to end up on CNN and with a bunch of other people who maybe were like-minded, but also because I think it was the right place for me, because I was exclusive to Trish Regan. I was able to go on every Thursday. I was able to argue a lot of the time, but sometimes find common ground, which was interesting. Not always.
I think it was very ahead of the times what you did on Fox. And I think, now, a whole network, News Nation, is dedicated to basically doing what you did on Fox, which is
splitting the needle, what do you call it? Threading the needle, straddling the fence.
Aisle, you have a million different ways to say it, but ultimately, it wasn't really being done all that much then. No,
and I think there was if you go back and, and obviously I have all the episodes, and I like to post the ones that are more fun when we're in Oz, but there were, I'd say maybe 20% of the time where we would reach an agreement, because I really realized, wow, I'm really not a Democrat, and I am upset by the far left, and I am upset about this. Fox, of course, demagogues it. I don't doubt that. But sometimes it was hard for me to find disagreement on every single thing.
Yeah.
Their ethos is horrible. We know they've lied about the election. I'm in no way defending them. I think what they've done in democracy is horrible. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I thought even going on there, yeah, you don't move the needle. Fox doesn't want to hear those voices, but hey, how do we know what needle? They do have dissenting voices. And even if that moves 0.5% of people, that could be the difference of an election. So I understand I didn't go on there and turn the entire Fox News crowd into raging dirty moderates, let alone liberals. But I'm glad I did it. It also gave me experience on live TV. That red light goes on and you're on, and not, oh, hi Adam, how are you? And how I like Hairspray, that kind of thing.
I think it's just such a great backstory that, ultimately Dirty Moderate was born on the Fox stage.
In a weird
it's very apropos. It's very fitting, really, that you recognize you weren't a Democrat. Mm-mm. You have, Republican leanings, but there was something in the middle, a place, now everybody calls it being politically homeless.
Which I am.
Which you are, which a lot of people are recognizing within themselves.
Just an independent.
Wow, they are too. And just like the Democrats used to be, were against segregation, all the different things, or they were representing a very different ethos than the current Democratic Party. I think everything is always in flux.
Always.
But ultimately, more people are heading in the direction of maybe I don't fit in one of these boxes.
Right.
And I think you're leading that charge beautifully.
Right. And as I always say to people, look, we made an effort here. I'm batting. The sweatshirt happens to be blue, not because of that, but we're batting for Team Blue because I don't want people who believe, actually, I don't want people who are fundamentally antithetical to American values and power. I'm a never Trumper first and foremost. I'm a never DeSantis guy. None of these people are offering a conservative alternative. They're offering a slash and burn, hateful, divide and conquer politics. And they're not conserving anything, actually. That's the irony. They actually are trying to tear down all the progress that's been made. So, but I don't fit comfortably at home in the Democratic Party, though, of course, I'm pro-choice. And as a gay man, I'm obviously pro-LGBT. And I'm obviously believe that we have to protect our environment. And though I am a Second Amendment supporter and believe in owning a firearm, I don't think there is any conceivable world where people need to own an AR-15. And I also think that the idea that our gun safety laws are this weak is a stain on us, because I think we could still be a gun-owning country and do better. We're not going to be a gun-free country, but to be a gun-rampant country, I think is proving to be a real tragic era in our time.
And for the record, who should be in charge of my uterus?
Not the government. You. That's the other thing. Limited government, and this is the interesting thing. When you have and there are some left. There's Massachusetts had a wonderful governor, Republican governor, Charlie Baker. He's not there anymore. But Vermont, I don't know if everybody knows this, Bernie Sanders' Vermont has a great governor, Phil Scott, who was reelected by almost 50.50 this November, because he is the liberal, I would say liberal. He's what they used to call a Nelson Rockefeller Republican. Mm-hmm. But guess what? He believes in knowing how to lower taxes, balance the budget. People are taken care of. They're not dying on the street, but government isn't running rampant. But guess what? That same government isn't controlling your uterus. It's making sure gay people and trans people can love who they love and be who they love. It's conscious of green energy and trying to be a little more forward thinking. It doesn't, again, it's not fossil fuels are never being used, because that's not realistic, but it's also not like, hey, let's have a burn some coal party, so it's, I think the American people, so many American people are in the middle. And if you think about it, I've talked about it on the show, the latest Pew Research poll in the history of their polling, it's 50, 60 years, it's the first time ever the majority of people, I can't remember, it was 53% or 56% of people identify as independents. And I think there's a reason. I think that even people like me who are fighting to make sure that Biden wins second term or the Democrats get in are very upset by the partisanship. And because there's all these nuances that get lost, and I see it, and you see, Biden just has come out with I think it's a $6.8 trillion bill. It's insane. We've spent trillions and trillions. I think upwards of 8 trillion in the past 5-6 years. Yes, we've had a pandemic. Yes, the Trump tax cuts. But you know what? We've done rescue plans and we've done an infrastructure bill. I'm not saying we don't have anything to do, but we have a lot of debt. And neither party cares about the debt, and acting like that people don't care because we need universal health care or we need climate change. Okay, well, you're bankrupting your grandkids. So you have to make a choice of what you're going to do. And we haven't minded our fiscal story. And that's a problem for all of us. It's not, I'm not slashing and burning things, but why not shore up the solvency of some of these social programs so they're there for people? This generation is not going to have any Social Security or Medicare. What do they think where do they think it's going to come from? They're going to pay into something that's not going to have a fiscal that's not going to have fiscal longevity. So anyway, that's just to give you an idea. But I don't hear Democrats saying that. I hear, well, the Republicans are going to throw your grandmother into the street. No, actually, Mitt Romney's not doing that. There are people who are suggesting that we protect these programs, but we look at them and figure out how to sustain them. They're not going to sustain themselves automatically. So.
And a lot of the policies that have already been run through are not working.
Right.
And for example, you and I drove through the capital of California yesterday.
Yes, we did.
And we saw probably about 2.5 miles worth of a homeless city.
We did.
And
it was like a shanty town almost, right? Like a.
I think ironically, we're on the edge of a country club golf course.
Yeah. It was very, very sad.
Things like that are just getting worse across the board, and aren't being addressed. And I think that's an important thing for us to focus on moving forward. So hopefully, issues like that we can focus on as a show. But speaking of the show, what is next for the show? Where are you taking your Dirty Moderate Nation? What's next? I think we've made the connection between culture and politics. So what's happening?
Well, a few things. We're beginning an unofficial. I mean, because I don't want to say that we're doing it separate from, but alongside, mixed in with our politics, we have an exciting episode coming up, as we'll tease soon, a culture series where we're going to talk more to people in the world of culture and connect that to what we do. I think we're excited because we'd like to be back on television. I know I do. That's part of the plan, and we're looking forward to that. And I think that we are also hopefully going to be engaging with the ideas and issues we believe in. Like you and I talked last night about, poor people need help in this country. They always have. The government has its limitations, but the government should never stint from helping people not be hungry or feeding them or making sure that their basic needs are met. And I think that gets lost because I think the middle class has been so screwed and so fucked over. When there was a robust middle class, the rich poor debate could be more binary. And now it's getting lost that there are people who are in very dire circumstances, to your point about these homeless city we saw. California is run like a shit house, and the money doesn't get properly allocated. It gets misused. So I think we're going to focus on that. And then we're also going to, I think, really position ourselves to be central to the conversation in 2024. I know every time we've heard this now since 2016, but this is the election of your lifetime, because now you're going to have not only Congress up in the presidency. I think we all worked really hard. I know we did at this podcast. I know that our friends at Mothers Against Greg Abbott did. I know that Lincoln Project did. People who kind of share the similar world. Joe Walsh, wanted to make sure that the Republicans didn't win, and we kind of held the line, so to speak, that House is only GOP because of gerrymandering, and it's a narrow majority. You saw Kevin McCarthy took 15 turns to be speaker because he's hostage to lunatics. So I think for 24, we want to be both on TV, expanding obviously our content, and continuing to make it so clear and fundamental how important this fight is. And, people always say, how do you do it? I said, well, democracy depends on me never being exhausted. Same for you. People get exhausted. Yep. Authoritarians are counting on your apathy. They're counting on your exhaustion. They're counting on you saying, I just don't have it in me for another time. Oh my God, how are we going to deal with Trump again? Well, we're going to beat him again is what we're going to do. And that's what we're going to do. And he knows it. And people like me and people like Lincoln Project and Americans, the majority of whom I think are going to make sure this guy never gets anywhere near the Oval Office. But it's going to take work. It's not, it's not something you can just sit around and do. And it's something that people have to engage with now. I always end a lot of the episodes, and I can say it now, go to vote.org now and find out in wherever you live in the country how to register if you're not. We always talked about last year a lot, 2020, 2/3 of the electorate voted, which was very high in that year. It was like, hundreds of millions or whatever, 100 and whatever million it was. But that meant a third of the people, 101 million people did not vote. 101 million people, which is basically a third of the population. We're like 330 million people. So think about that. A voting age, obviously not children.
It's the most precious commodity that
Right.
we have in this country as Americans.
Right.
We have a great T-shirt in our store, online store, our merch store that says, "Don't vote, don't bitch."
Where can people go, actually? Let's tell them about that.
So they can go to TeePublic, T-E-E,
Yeah.
public.com.
Get this.
Dirty
You can wear my name. We have sweatshirts, t-shirts, and you guys have done such a great job. There's every color, every design. There's pride stuff. You're going to love it. And we wear it. I'm wearing it. I even have a Dirty Modern t-shirt on. You can't see.
And as we get closer to 24, we're going to get snarkier in our merch line and really kind of put all of our best efforts out there to make sure that everybody controls their own uterus. They can love who they love. All these little simple human rights.
Yeah, and back to Hairspray, one quick thing. I think it's why you can say this about a lot of things, but last night as I watched Hairspray for the zillionth, billionth, trillionth
My
time,
first, your trillion.
whatever it was, my trillionth, to sit there and say, God, we need the show now more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
During the early years of the Bush administration, so many people in my life and around me, who certainly were liberal, would say, this is what America needs. We're grieving this, where are we going to go to war with Iraq, which we did, that went early on into the run. Like, where are we going? After 9/11 and the country needed a boost, people were rejuvenated by Hairspray. They felt America had hope again. And it gave us hope in a different way. And now I think it still gives us hope. I mean, there were some of the lines, which I've heard a lot in the show last night, I think resonated in a different way. Because we are actually trying to stop a certain segment of people, a small minority, folks. They're not the majority, but they're really trying to turn back the hands on it. And that's scary, be it for your uterus, be it for somebody's gender identity, for my marriage or whom I love or whatever it may be, and other things. And also abandoning allies in Europe because they're isolationist assholes who are using Putin talking points. I mean, I just posted the great moment in June of 1987 when Ronald Reagan went in front of the Berlin Wall right near the Brandenburg Gate. And what he did, he say, "Oh, I know we have a little dispute about this area," like Ron DeSantis called Ukraine a territorial dispute. No, he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate." 3 years later, the wall crumbled. These things all
And that was unscripted. They didn't want him to say it. Isn't that correct?
I think it was a Peggy Noonan line. I think it wasn't unscripted. Peggy Noonan was a great speech. Ronald, you're right. Reagan did speak off the cuff a lot.
I think they didn't want him to say it. I always have to defer to you, but I am going to look it up.
Let's look it up. I don't know. My understanding, Peggy Noonan, the great Peggy Noonan, who now writes for the Wall Street Journal. And I love reading her, even when I don't agree with her. But I love her. She's a great writer. She famously wrote a fantastic political memoir, What I Saw at the Revolution, after she left the Reagan White House. Right? The Reagan Revolution. And then she was also the first Bush speech. So first Bush speechwriter. Peggy Noonan was, for those that don't know, and she's still writing, Pulitzer winner at the Wall Street Journal. She wrote Morning in America. That's her term. She wrote Read My Lips, No New Taxes. She wrote Tear Down This Wall, is my memory. And she famously wrote that gorgeous, heartbreaking speech when Reagan commemorated or memorialized the victims of the Challenger in 86 when it blew up, which finally said, paraphrasing, I remember, this. I remember Reagan said I remember the last time we saw them, we saw their faces, and we never see them again. And she ended it. He ended it. He again was an actor, but he could deliver it in a way. And he said, "And they slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God." Ugh.
Gorgeous.
Peggy Noonan. So, yeah. So it always gets me choked up. So
it's very moving, and not unlike the finale of Hairspray. Yeah. And the arc that just everyone in the cast grows and learns and comes together and it's so hopeful and damn it, that beat would not be stopped.
No, it's I have to say, I think it is, and I'm biased, but many unbiased people agree. It is one of the great finales of a Broadway show ever, because it not only wraps everything up thematically, it creates its own self-contained build into this just, what would you call it? Cornucopia of ecstasy, right? It builds and builds and builds until, right, the confetti comes out of the can. I mean, it builds to such a height, leaving you so high that David Denby, who reviewed it originally for the New Yorker, wrote, "You leave the theater strong and confident and ready for anything," in his words. You just feel energized. And few finales send you out of the house like that. Now, again, in a show more dramatic, you wouldn't have that. But in musical comedy, in the classic ones, that really timeless. You Can't Stop the Beat really does that. Which I believe the whole score is, but that song is, I think, it's an anthem for the show. It's an anthem for America. It's an anthem for all time, and we should make sure that the beat never gets stopped.
And although Dirty Moderate is nowhere near its finale, I wish the same for the podcast and Dirty Moderate Nation and all the things that we want to do moving forward. And being the port in the American political storm also will not be stopped.
No.
And we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. And we're so grateful to you for doing what you're doing. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do it with you.
Thank you.
And
people get to see that there are fabulous people doing this. My amazing producers. I don't know if people remember during People Liked It when we did our live election coverage.
Yeah.
And we were just live, and at some point I was like, Jeremy. So people were like, "Who's Jeremy?" There is a Jeremy. They've heard of him and heard of you, but then it's like, you exist.
We are.
You don't come in front. Faceless.
Masters,
but you got to hear me, live TV in action. Hey, Jeremy, give me that.
Yeah.
So you don't get to hear that on the podcast. But listen, I love that we did it. Think of it this way. Hairspray being on the road again and being alive again is almost like, even though it's something I did originally, this tour is not produced directly by me. We license it, but it's the original production, the original team, our show. How do you like that we're out there fighting for democracy and for hope and for love and for inclusion, and that we have a show that I happened to once produce that's doing it alongside of us simultaneously? What timing, right? It's like we have this cultural partner without having made a partnership.
Exactly.
Explicitly.
Exactly. And both of them will be endlessly successful doing the right thing. Can't get better than that.
No, it's true. It's true.
So we will see everybody on the other side. Well, you won't see me, but you'll definitely see Adam on the next podcast and next episode and everything that we're going to do. And thanks so much for coming along on the journey with us, guys and gals and everyone else.
Thanks, guys. New episodes dropping imminently. More to come. Stay tuned. And as I always say, stay dirty, stay moderate, and stay safe.